Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today at M2M Live. And today is the fourth Sunday of the month, and we have with us Reverend Samuel Green, all the way from Australia. Hello, brother. How are you?
Good evening, George. I'm well, thank you. How are you?
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. And I know we've been going through where to start with Islam. And how long ago when you wrote this book?
I actually wrote it in 2018 and it was published in 2019. And yeah, so that's the book. Hang on, here it is. There it is. And it's basically based around the training sections that I give to people, although it has some extra material in it, more material on, history and other bits and pieces. So it all fits together, the training and the book all fit together.
That's awesome. And we've been going chapter by chapter, and today we are at chapter 9 on the topic of...
The topic is the reliability of the Bible and the Quran. And it's a chapter from the book, but it follows differently in the training session. So this session follows after how to use the Quran in evangelism, because what you'll find is that when you talk to Muslims, one of their get out of free jail card type arguments, it's a very lazy argument, is just to say, well, the Bible's been changed. The Bible's been changed.
Yeah.
And they just use that to, as you know, to stop thinking about things. So that's what we're going to look at it today.
Yeah, and you are right. This is one of the topics comes up right away with any conversation with Muslims. Right away, oh, your Bible being corrupted. That's really important topic. But before we start, if you please watching, copy the link, send it to your friends, invite and encourage others to join us. But also, even afterward, send it to other people, encourage other people to watch and to be equipped. Our only purpose is to see the body of Christ engage in reaching Muslims with the gospel wherever they are. And thank you for joining us today. And Reverend Samuel, it's all yours, brother.
Okay. Now let me just get up my screen.
PowerPoint.
Sorry, I forgot to.
No problem.
That to you there. There it is.
Yep.
There it is, right there. So let's see. So that's what we're doing today. We're doing the reliability of the Bible and the Quran. And I want to begin by saying, what does the Quran actually say about the Bible? What does the Quran say about the Bible? And there are several verses like this in the Quran which make very clear statements about the Bible. So it says, say, so this is what Muslims are instructed to say, we believe in God and in what was revealed to us, that is the Quran, and in what was revealed to Abraham, Isaac, Ishmael, Jacob, and the tribes, and in what was given to Moses and Jesus, and in what was given to the prophets from their Lord. We make no distinction between any of them. So just have a look at that. So what's it saying here? It's saying that they believe in God and what was revealed. So it's talking about what was revealed, that is the books. So what was revealed to Abraham, Isaac, Ishmael, it goes through all of them. And what are they meant to say? We make no distinction between any of them. Now, that's a fairly strong statement, isn't it? That when talking about the different scriptures, no distinction is to be made. So, why do Muslim leaders say the Bible is corrupted? As George and I were discussing before, when you talk to your Muslim friend, you will often find that they've just got this attitude. It's an inbuilt skepticism. It's something that's just taught to them from the time they're born. The Bible's been changed. The Bible's been changed. That's not what the Quran says, but this is what they're taught. So why would Muslim leaders teach them this? Why would they say the Bible's been changed, it's corrupted? There are two reasons. And the first reason is because the Quran claims to confirm the teaching of the Bible. Oh, you people of the book, believe in what we have revealed, that is the Quran, confirming what is with you, that is the Bible. So this is the first claim. And I know that at the moment, David Wood and others have been really pushing this point in what's called the Islamic dilemma. And it's a dilemma that we've known about for a while here. And so this is part of the dilemma, that the Quran says it confirms the teaching of the Bible. However, the Quran does not confirm the Bible. So let's have a look at some of the main theologies of the Bible and compare them to the Quran. So first of all, I've just got a structure of the Bible there. You can see that the Bible is a collection of many books from about a 1500-year period, whereas the Quran is claimed to be from Muhammad. It's believed to be from Muhammad over a 23-year period. But what we see is that throughout the Torah, Prophets, Psalms, and Gospel, humanity is said to be created in the image of God. But the Quran never says that. In fact, in Surah 42, verse 11, it says nothing is like God. Nothing's like God. But the Bible is clear that we are made in the image and likeness of God. There's the fatherhood and the son of God, beginning with Moses and going all the way through into the gospel. There are different expressions of the fatherhood and the son of God. But the Quran denies any of that. It just doesn't deny that Jesus is the son of God. It denies that anyone, even Christians, can call themselves sons of God. The prophets teach that God comes to dwell with his people. We see God dwelling with Adam, God dwelling with Israel in the tabernacle and promising to dwell with us perfectly, which is what happens in the incarnation. But in the Quran, God doesn't come to dwell with us. We're on a journey to God. Humanity in the prophets is corrupted by sin. We see that just throughout the whole story. In Noah's time, we see the corruption of humanity by sin. Israel is given the law and God comes to them. And even over the long period of time that God works with Israel, we see that Israel is unable to keep the law. So humanity is corrupted by sin. And the promise of the prophets is that God is going to send his spirit to change our hearts and to make us clean so that we can live for him, because we can't do it ourselves. But that's not the case in the Quran. In the Quran and in Islam, you're not corrupted by sin. You're born pure. The books before, the books of the prophets, they all have the priesthood and the sacrifice of atonement for sin. From the time you got the priesthood all the way back to Melchizedek, but you've got the priesthood with Moses, and the story of the priest just goes all the way through, continues into the gospel. In the Quran, there is no priesthood. There is no priesthood. You don't need a priest. You don't need a mediator between a holy God and a sinful humanity. You don't need that in Islam. There are the covenants of Noah, Abraham, Moses, and David. All important covenants, and it's very important for Christians to learn their covenant theology and each of these covenants that God made and how they become a plank, a foundation for understanding God's work throughout all of history and how they come to their fulfillment in Jesus. But they're unknown in the Quran. They're unknown. And related to this is the one story of redemption, the one who is going to come and crush Satan's head that God promises at the very beginning in Genesis 3. That story of redemption, of God coming to save his people, to bring the new creation, it's just unknown in the Quran, that story of creation. Now, what I've just tried to show you there is not just individual verses. because it's not as convincing, is it? If I just showed you, well, look at this verse in the Bible, look at this verse in the Quran, they're different. You can get examples of that, and understood in their context, they can be explained away. What I've tried to do for you here is just to show you the main theological planks, the main theological foundations that hold all of the prophets together, hold all of the books of the prophets together. Humanity in the image of God, the fatherhood and son of God. God comes to dwell with these people. Humanity corrupted by sin, the priesthood and sacrifice of atonement, the covenants, the story of redemption. That's just the bread and butter of the prophets, and the Quran has none of it. It has none of it. So Muhammad just doesn't confirm the message of the prophets at all. He simply doesn't confirm the message of the prophets at all. He's a completely different religion to the prophets. He's doing a completely different direction and project. He's just doing something completely different to all the prophets. So that's the first reason that, or the first problem that Muslim leaders have. The Quran says that it confirms the teaching of the Bible, but it just doesn't, not even in the most basic sense. Now, the second reason that Muslim leaders attack the Bible is because the Quran says that Muhammad is foretold in it. So those who follow the messenger, the prophet of his community, whom they will find mentioned in the Torah and gospel in their possession. So here is the promise that Muhammad is the prophet for his community, for the Arabs, but he's mentioned in the Torah and the gospel in their possession. So it's not talking about books that were lost. It's not talking about books which they no longer have. It's saying the Torah and the gospel in their possession. But Muhammad's not in their possession. Sorry, Muhammad's not in the Bible, right? He's not in the Bible. And so Muslims leaders have got this problem. The Quran says that it confirms the teaching of the Bible. It doesn't. It says that Muhammad is foretold in the Bible. He's not. So how do Muslim leaders solve this problem? They blame Christians. They blame Christians. So you need to understand that this is why they attack the Bible, right? Before we start looking at defending the reliability of the Bible or the Quran or anything like that, we've got to understand the motive that drives Muslims to do this. And that is, the Quran says it confirms the teaching of the Bible. That Muhammad's foretold in the Bible, he's not. And so rather than take responsibility for their own failures, right, rather than just say, yes, this is false, take responsibility for their own book. No, they blame us and try to blame us for Muhammad's failure, for their own failure. And so they attack the Bible and say that it's been changed. And they've got a lot of practice at doing this. And when you meet Muslims, you may find that they bring up, textual variants in the Bible and all these types of things. And it can be quite disconcerting, for the Christian, who hears this for the first time. It might be a real shock to them because they've just never really thought about it before. And so what can actually happen is that when the Muslim starts talking about the history of the Bible and the various aspects of that, because the Christian's never been taught this at church, I've been to churches for a long time now, and we've never had a sermon about the history of the Bible. I've just never had one. I've gone to good evangelical churches. We just don't do that type of thing. And so what happens is that the Muslim becomes the educator to the Christian. Right? They do this with the Trinity and incarnation, with doctrine as well. When churches don't discuss these things with their congregations, then what happens is the Muslim becomes the teacher. He becomes the educator. And so they begin to educate the Christian about the history of the Bible. And so this can be quite disconcerting for the Christian when they first hear it from a Muslim. And so what I want to do now is to help us think through, how do we answer this question of the Bible is corrupt. So it's not really a question, is it? It's a statement. How do we answer the statement, the Bible is corrupt? Well, with all of that by way of introduction, I want to say when a Muslim says to you the Bible has been changed, that it's corrupt, they're actually only saying to you half their argument. They're only telling you half their argument. The other half of the argument is, and there's one perfect Quran. So the full Islamic argument is the Bible's corrupted and there's one perfect Quran. Now, what will tend to happen is they'll just tell you the first part. They'll just tell you the first part, and most Christians don't know much about the first part. They know, and so then the Muslim can then create an impression that the Quran's just not like this. All right. But this is really important. If a Muslim says to you, and this is really the first application, if a Muslim says to you, the Bible is corrupted, the Bible's been changed, then you need to say, are you saying the Bible is corrupt and there's one perfect Quran? That's what you've got to say. That's your first response. You must discuss both books and not the Bible alone. You've got to have a level playing field, because if you don't, they're going to create a false impression that, we attack the Bible, but the Quran, there's nothing like this. And because they're not even discussing the Quran, they're just creating an impression. So this is the first application. If a Muslim says to you, the Bible's been changed, you say, are you saying the Bible's been changed and there's one perfect Quran? And then you've got to examine the claims made about the Quran. Now, you can do this with my booklet. Where's my booklet? Hang on. So I've got these different booklets that you can print out. Sorry, I've given them away, I think. I thought I had one right here. If you go to my website, engagingwithislam.org, and you look on the menu, you'll see evangelistic leaflets as a menu item. Click on that and you can download a booklet which looks at the preservation of the Quran. And you can take that to a printer and get it printed out as a small booklet. So that would be my first thing is, you've said, let's talk about both books. And then you want to look at the Quran. And what we're going to actually see is that there are many different versions of the Quran, and it's simply false for them to say there's one Quran. And once you can actually show them that there's not one Quran, this changes the whole discussion, as I'm sure you can tell. Okay, if they want to attack the Bible and you show them there's different Qurans, all of a sudden everything's different. It's different for them, it's different for you. And I'm going to look at this information in a moment, but I just want to say there's a booklet that you can that you can print out and give to them, or just give them to read online. The second point you've got to bring up is that we have ample proof that the Bible has not been changed. We've got ample proof. We've got lots of ancient copies. We've got ancient quotes. We've got ancient translations. And there is simply no evidence at all that the Bible's been changed, right? We've got copying errors, which we can identify, but that's not changing it. That's just copying errors that happens to any handwritten book. So there's simply no evidence that the Bible's been changed. And you could, if you want, also look at what the Quran says about the Bible. So that's how I would approach this question. We need to understand why they attack the Bible. It's because of the failure of the Quran, and they're blaming us for that. I would ask them then, are you saying there's one Quran? Right? Are you saying the Bible's changed and there's only one Quran? Let's look at the evidence about the Quran. Let's look at the evidence about the Bible. And we can even look at what the Quran says about the Bible. So what I want to do now is actually to do the historical and textual work on the Quran. There it is. There's the leaflet. You can pause that there, or whatever you want to do. So I want to now look at the claims that Muslims make about the Quran. The first is that Muhammad just simply recited the Quran from the angel Gabriel, and passed it on to Muslims. And there's no editing. It's just direct dictation. It comes from God to Gabriel to Muhammad to the Muslims, and that's it. That is so false. That is completely against the hadith. So let's have a look at this hadith. Narrated al-Bara, there was revealed, not equal are those believers who sit at home and those who strive and fight in the cause of Allah. Now, so you can see that this hadith begins by quoting a verse from the Quran, Surah 4, verse 95. And it's a surah, a verse about how those Muslims who go out and fight on jihad are at a higher level than those who don't. Okay, so not equal are those who sit at home and those who strive or jihad and fight in the cause of Allah. At that time, Amir bin Maktam, the blind man, was sitting behind the apostle. He said, "O Allah's apostle, what is your order for me as regards the above verse? As I am a blind man." So you can see his problem, that this man is blind, but he wants to be a good Muslim, but he can't really go out on jihad, can he? So is he always going to be a second-rate Muslim because he can't go out on jihad, even though he would if he could, but he's blind? You see the problem, right? So notice, so instead of the above verse, the following verse was revealed. Not equal are those believers who sit at home, except those who are disabled and those who strive and fight in the cause of Allah. So do you see how the verse has been edited, has been updated? And it's now got this phrase in it, except those who are disabled, has now been put into it. And I just want you to see that that's in Sahih al-Bukhari. It's also in Sahih Muslim as well. That the idea that the Quran was simply recited with no editing is simply false. It's not even true. It's just an exaggeration that Muslims say. In fact, Muhammad changed verses like that so often that there's a verse in the Quran explaining why he changed verses. So, and when we exchange a verse in place of another, and God knows very well what he is sending down, they, that is the Meccans, say to Muhammad, "You are simply inventing this." So you see how the we there is referring to God. And it's saying that when we exchange a verse in place of another, so things are being changed, there's exchange happening, they say Muhammad's just inventing it. Now, was the Quran memorized? Was the Quran memorized? And I'm sure you've heard Muslims say this to you, that the Quran's been perfectly memorized. Now, it's quite tricky what they do here, because they change the word remember and was the Quran remembered to make it was the Quran memorized. And I mean, I can memorize a verse from the Bible, but does that mean the entire Bible has been remembered, right? You know what I mean? Like it's a different way of talking to say it's all been remembered. And so they say to us that the Quran's been memorized, but they're spinning it around, because the Quran actually says that it hasn't been remembered. It hasn't been remembered. So let's look at a couple of verses. We will make you, O Muhammad, we will make you recite, O Muhammad, and you will not forget except what Allah should will. Except what Allah should will. So that's not saying that Muhammad will remember everything he's been told. It's saying that he will only forget what Allah wants him to forget. So the Quran actually says that part of the Quran has been forgotten. Okay. In the hadith of Muslim and Bukhari, we read this: we used to recite a surah which resembled in length and severity to Surah 9, Barata. I have, however, forgotten it. And so it's not in the Quran anymore. And so that's a much longer hadith. I've just given you a short part of it there. You can look up the references yourself, and it's in the booklet that I've given at the start. But even the hadith says that entire surahs have been forgotten. So when Muslims say to us the Quran's been remembered and memorized and remembered, that's actually against the Quran, and it's against the Hadith. Again, in my booklet, I give you all these references that you can print out and give to your Muslim friend. Now, did Muhammad give the Quran as a complete book to Muslims? Well, again, the answer is no. Narrated Zayd bin Thabit, therefore I, Umar, suggest you, Abu Bakr, order that the Quran be collected. I said to Umar, how can you do something which Allah's apostle did not do? Right? So that there is no Quran, complete ordered Quran from Muhammad. Right? There just wasn't. This is what their sources say. Abu Bakr kept on urging me to accept this idea until Allah opened my chest for what he had opened the chest of Abu Bakr and Umar. So I started looking for the Quran and collecting it from what was written on palm stalks, thin white stones, and also from men who knew it by heart. Now, in technical language, what this means is there is no autograph of the Quran from Muhammad. So an autograph is the original copy, right? So there was original copy of the letter to the Romans from the Apostle Paul. Paul actually had that written out, and there's an original copy of it. And then copies are made from that. But with the Quran, Muhammad never made an original. He never actually put it all together in a book. And instead, what happens is that you've got his companions making collections. And as we've seen in that previous section, that surahs are being forgotten from this, and they're bringing together what they can. And so we see here that Muhammad's companions made various collections. There were, in the early centuries of Islam, synoptic Qurans. There were synoptic Qurans. Now, what's the word synoptic mean? Synoptic is a word that's used when talking about the weather, but it's also used for Matthew, Mark, and Luke, because the word synoptic means seen together. Seen together. You know, optic, synoptic, syn means sort of with in Greek, and optic, eye. So it means that Matthew, Mark, and Luke are seen together because they're highly similar. And I'm sure you've noticed that when you've read them. Muhammad's companions made their own collections, and these collections were different to each other. Now, they're all being treated as Quran, as authentic, and I'm not denying that, but they had different numbers of surahs. The surahs were arranged differently, and there were different words for the same verse. And so these different Qurans were being used throughout the Islamic Empire as the Muslims conquered those around them. Now, this actually led to problems for the Muslims. And so we read here, narrated Anas bin Malik, Hudhayfa bin al-Yaman came to Uthman at the time when the people, that is the Muslims of Syria and the Muslims of Iraq, were waging war to conquer Armenia and Azerbaijan. Hudhayfa was afraid of that is the Muslims of Syria and Iraq, of their differences in the recitation of the Quran. So we've got a situation where the Muslims have come out and started to conquer the Christians. The jihadists have been conquering the Christians, and some jihadists are in Syria, some jihadists are in Iraq, and they're joining together to go and now fight Christians up in Armenia and Azerbaijan. But what happens is when these two jihadist groups get together, they're reciting the Quran differently. Now, this is a political problem, isn't it? Because you don't want different jihadist groups arguing over things. That can turn into civil war pretty quickly. And so what does Hudhayfa say? He says, so he said to Uthman, O chief of believers, save this nation before they differ about the book. Therefore, Uthman sent to every Muslim province one copy of what they had copied. So Uthman gets standard versions of the Quran made, and he ordered that all other Quranic materials, whether written in fragmentary manuscripts or whole copies, be burnt. So that is, early in Islam's history, there is a wholesale burning of the Qurans to standardize one version. Now, I hope you can see that that really makes the Islamic claim that there's one perfect Quran hollow. It completely annuls it, doesn't it? So it's important for you to understand this as a Christian, that when Muslims are saying there's one perfect Quran, it's simply not true. It is just not true. It's just dishonest, particularly for an educated Muslim to be saying that to you. Maybe for one who hasn't learnt their faith, they've just probably been told that there's multiple Qurans, sorry, that there's just one Quran, and they've never thought anything different. But for other Muslims, they do know the difference. Now, what I want to look at is some of the ancient manuscripts of the Quran. So this is the Samarkand manuscript, and you can actually get it on, it used to be microfilm, but you can get it in JPEG files. And I want to show you that there are actually textual variants between this very old copy of the Quran and the modern Quran. So here we go. I'm looking at the 1924 Egyptian Standard Quran, which is the Quran of today. You can see that in that gap there, there's now the word Allah. I'll just do these quickly now. This huwa, see how there's a huwa there? That huwa has been turned into an Allah. In that gap there, you've now got an inna Allaha. This, in that gap, there's now an Allah, which clarifies the text. In that gap there, you've got a whole phrase. And so I just want to point out that in the ancient manuscripts, or not ancient, in the medieval manuscripts of the Quran, there are textual variants. There are variants. There just are. And these people here would be they're authors where you can take this further if you wanted to look at that. Now, the other thing that happens is that if you look at these two texts, you'll see that there's a difference. See how in the bottom text, there's all these little dots and dashes, but in the top, there's none. So when the early Qurans were being copied out, the Arabic text was quite ambiguous. And it didn't spell out the entire word. It gave the basic structure of a word, but the word could go in different ways. The spelling of it and the meaning of it could go in different ways. And you need those dots and dashes to clarify which consonants are being used and what vowels are being used. And what we see, and I actually just got this the other day from watching a talk. Where is it? There's a, what's the phrase? There's a break in the passing of the knowledge. What I mean by that is people were given this text here, the top one, and they had to work out for themselves how to put these dots and dashes in. There was some type of break in the knowledge from Muhammad and this text to how it came to be later on. And so people put the dots and dashes in all different positions. And so the result is that there are 10 canonical versions of the Quran where they put the dots and dashes in different places. So let's have a quick look at these. Well, and the two main ones are the Quran according to Imam Hafs and the Quran according to Imam Warsh. They're the two main ones used in the world today. So here are examples. If you look at the dots up there, you see how there's two dots up there and two dots down here. That might look like a small change, but it changes it from you say to they say. Now that changes the context of who's speaking. You've got kala or kul. That changes it from a statement about something Muhammad did to a command to Muslims to do something. You've got an extra word here. This doesn't change the meaning overly, but it's certainly a different recitation because now you've got an extra word. This one changes the word a lot. So you see that little dot down there, that's a b, and that's abdu, which is slave, abdu. Whereas over here, it's ainda, which is a preposition. So in this one, that word is a noun, the word for slave, and over here it's a preposition with, and that changes the sentence completely. They are slaves of the most gracious. They are with the most gracious. You can see how the text is ambiguous, and people have put the dots and dashes in different places. Here we've got an example where one's in the plural, one's in the singular, and then one's in the passive, one is in the active. So many a prophet killed, katala, killed, many a prophet killed. Over here it's in the passive, kutila, a prophet was killed. Well, did the prophet kill or was he killed? I mean, it's the opposite meaning, isn't it? And you can actually buy I've got an article on this that you can look up where I go through this more. And Fidel Solomon's Bridges translation of the Quran is something you can download, and he puts the 10 different versions in translation and their differences there for you. Now, what about with the Bible? Well, with the Bible, we have ancient copies. I'm going to spend much less time on this because I think this information is just more known. We've got ancient copies of the Bible. We've got ancient translations. We've got ancient quotes. So a quote is where, for instance, in 1 Corinthians 11, the Apostle Paul says, on the night before Jesus was betrayed, he took bread and gave thanks and said, "This is my body given for you." And he actually quotes the material that we find in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So we have quotes like that beginning in the New Testament itself and basically going up from there continuously. So we've got quotes. Now, and you do the same type of thing, don't you? You might write someone a Christmas card or a birthday card and you write a Bible verse on it. Well, that's actually evidence as to what the Bible was that you had access to. And so what scholars do is they go and read the apostolic fathers and then the early church fathers, and they look at their quotes and they say, what can we tell from these quotes? And so when we look at the ancient copies, the ancient translations, the ancient quotes, we can see that the New Testament has not been changed. It hasn't been changed. There certainly are copying errors, and I'm not denying that. There are copying errors. If you wrote out a large book by hand, you will make copying errors. But because we've got many copies from different locations, we're able to compare these with each other. Now, I didn't put that in there just yet. So because we've got different copies from different locations, we're able to compare different Bibles together. And so what we might find is if that Bibles in one place say something, Bibles in another place say the same thing, Bibles in another place say the same as everyone else, but there's one place where they just say something a bit different. It's most likely that one place where it's different has just had some copying error. And that's why it doesn't agree with what everyone else who's, sort of independent from each other has written. And so it's just a matter of deducting our way through the old manuscripts and saying, where are the changes that we can see? Where are the copying errors that have been made? And because we've got lots of copies from different locations separate from each other, we can compare them and work out the copying errors. And that's how we get the modern Bibles today. Now, what have I got here? Sometimes Muslims will quote to us people like Bart Ehrman. Let me just read to you what Bart Ehrman writes. He says, with this abundance of evidence, what can we say about the total number of variants known today? Scholars differ significantly in their estimates. Some say there are 200,000 variants known. Some say 300,000, some 400,000 or more. We do not know for such because despite impressive developments in computer technology, no one has been able to count them all. Perhaps, as indicated earlier, it is simply best to leave the matter in comparative terms. There are more variations among the manuscripts than there are words in the New Testament. Now, when you read that, or a Muslim quotes it to you, he gives the impression that the Bible is dreadful, that the New Testament has got, nothing. There's more variants than words in the New Testament. Now, at this point, Bart Ehrman is knowingly being dishonest. He's knowingly being dishonest because the book that he's written here, let me just flick that back to that one. This is written for the popular level. It's not written for academics. He would never say this at an academic level. And he doesn't in his academic books, because what he's actually doing is he's playing a trick on us. He's just saying that a copying error is a variant, and it doesn't work that way. For instance, most of the differences are differences like this. So I live in Australia and we spell colour C-O-L-O-U-R. In the US, you spell it C-O-L-O-R. Now, that's a variant, according to Bart Ehrman. And in one sense, it is a variant, but what does it actually mean? Well, it doesn't change anything, does it? It's just there are regional ways of words being spelt, but it's the same word, same meaning. And so this is what the bulk of the differences are. They're these types of differences. And he actually spells this out in other parts of his books. But he likes to create the impression that the Bible has just been changed and you can just write it off. With the copying errors, as I said, because we have multiple copies in different locations, we're able to compare them and identify the copying errors and correct for them. And this is what this type of book does. So this is my Greek New Testament. Where is it? There it is. Here's my Greek New Testament. So that's it in the flesh. And what they do in this Greek New Testament is they actually get together all the ancient manuscripts and they go through them letter by letter and check by comparing everything to make sure that they can identify any copying errors and that they can establish the original text. And so down the bottom here, this is called the apparatus. And the apparatus is listing out all the different manuscripts that are used to prove the above, to prove that the above is genuine. Now, when you read one of these books, it actually tells you the times when there are real variants, when there are variants which are actually important. Bart Ehrman talks about, 400,000 variants. But as I said, they're not variants. They're either just different ways of the word being spelt, or they're some type of copying error, or they may be some type of other error. But what are the areas, what are the variants that are actually meaningful? What are the ones that are actually meaningful? Well, when you read our textual critical books on the New Testament, they say this: the evaluation of all 1,438 sets of variants cited in the apparatus have been completely revised, completely reconsidered. So that is that this book was saying that there's 1,438 variants, which are significant, right? So it's not 400,000, right? It's not 400,000. When you go and read the academics in this area, they say 1,438. Now, that might be troubling you a bit, but I just want to assure you that that's minimal. Now, why? Because there's 138,020 words in the New Testament. And some of these variants are just one letter. Some might be a word. So I'm just going to take them on a word basis. That's I'm trying to be forthright as to how I'm calculating this. So that actually works out at 1%. Okay, well, 1.04%. Those number of variants to the total number of words. That is, we can have full confidence in 99% of the New Testament text. And there's questions, and we have those in our footnotes. So I'm not saying anything we haven't said before. It's in your footnotes. There's 1% which is where we have a question. right? We'll have a question, say, it could go this way, it could go that way. That is phenomenal. You need to understand a 99% text from a handwritten text from the ancient world. There is nothing that compares to that. That is unbelievable in terms of the genuineness of its preservation. Now, what about, now you might say, what about the end of Mark's gospel and the woman caught in adultery and 1 John 5:7, which Muslims love to bring up? Well, these are actually exceptions that can be easily identified, right? So these are exceptions that can be identified, and they do not represent the 99% of the text of the New Testament, right? So you can't quote the exception and say this represents the whole. Now, this is what Muslims do to us. They quote the exception that can be identified and corrected for, so it's not even a problem, and say, oh, this represents the whole. No. We can correct for this. Okay, so don't let them trick you with that. Now, what about with the Quran? Well, as I said, you can get books on the Quran which have all the different 10 versions and their differences translated. This is that Bridges translation. And if you go to my article on Answering Islam, you can get the link to this. And so what I did was I counted up all of the variants. Fidel Suleiman says that he has only included 30% of the variants because the rest of them don't really affect the meaning. And that's fine. I don't mind him doing that. We do the same with our New Testaments. But he says 30% do have an effect on meaning. And so he's just including those. So if we look at those and we do similar numbers, what do we come up with? Well, we see that in the Hafs Quran, there's 965 variants and 77,915 words. That is, there's a variation in 1.23%, variation of 1.23% within the text of the Quran. And if we look at that with the Bible, we can see that they're both about 1%. Both about 1%. Now, I've got quite technical in that last section. I hope I haven't put you off. But the reason I have is I wanted to actually give you sound numbers. Because what tends to happen is people just quote things like Bart Ehrman and say 400,000 and, the Bible's been well preserved. I actually want to give you the process and the actual numbers and the scholarly works and the exact numbers so that you can say, no, it's 99%. And actually the Quran is 99% amongst the 10 variants. So to finish up, here's our application. The Muslim says to you, the Bible has been changed. So what are you to say? You're to say, are you saying the Bible has been changed and there is one perfect Quran? Right? That's what you've got to say. Are you saying that? Then show the different versions of the Quran and its history. And you can give them that booklet that I mentioned you can download and give them time to process this because for many of them, this will shock their world. Then explain the evidence for the Bible with the manuscripts, translations, and quotes. And if you wanted to, you could also look at what the Quran says about the Bible, but I did that in the previous session. And so you can ask them to stop exaggerating and to really stop blaming Christians for the failure of what Muhammad said. So that's it there. All right. Well, that's it, George.
Hey, brother. That's just amazing information. I'm looking at the chat and see if there's any questions. Did you, brother, debate this topic with a Muslim before?
Yes. I'm pretty sure I did one with Abdullah Kundi years ago, where I looked at the textual variants of the Quran. But what I'm finding is that they're hesitant to want to debate it these days, because back in the early days, Christians didn't know as much about it. And so you would have Islamic debaters saying, there's one Quran, there's one Quran. But I think the main debaters try to avoid this subject now because we've caught up, we've caught up for years, but so I just actually just got this from my local Islamic bookshop. I'll just hold it up there for you. So it's a color-coded Quran with the 10 readings, and everything's color-coded, so you can see, the differences between the 10 versions. So you can get this stuff really easily now. When I wrote my first article on this, which was in 1998, for Answering Islam, it was actually very hard to get Qurans from Morocco and other places. Yeah, I think you've got it as well.
Yeah, it's not. Look, Muslims say the Quran was revealed in 7 letters.
Yes.
Then you bring up the 10, they will say, 10 readings.
Yeah.
Then when you open the book of the 10 readings, you're going to find in the bottom of each page, there's the 10 students of Muhammad that they wrote the Quran. And under each one of them, 2 to 3 different students did their own copy of the Quran. There's variances between them. In this Quran, actually, it's not 10. It's 33 Qurans in one Quran.
Yeah, okay.
33 different ones. And you can see we have a lot of them here. It's unbelievable that now it's the same meaning.
Yeah, well, which is not.
With their Lord, angels with their lords, or the slaves of the lords? You're telling me that, it is, if they are the slaves of the Lord, they have to be with their Lord. That's what I thought before, the Quran perfect to the letter, but now they trying to go around it.
Yeah. Now, one of the phrases I was trying to remember, I thought I had on a piece of paper. I just can't find it now. Gabriel Reynolds just had an interview recently, and he spoke about the disruption of knowledge. The disruption of knowledge. And what he means by that is that when you look at the Quran and its history, it looks like the original Quran is written out wherever, but then there's something where it loses its continued practice, and then it has to start up again, and there's been this disruption in knowledge. So, for instance, the magical letters at the start of different surahs.
Alif, Lam, Mim.
And so nobody knows what they are. Now, that's an example of a disruption of knowledge, because they would have originally had some purpose. Either it's magic, right? Either it's magic, or it's something that we no longer know, and no Muslim knows, because you read them, that they don't know. And so what that means is there's some disruption between Muhammad, who had these for some reason. We don't know what it is now. So that's a disruption. We just don't know. It's been lost. There's a disruption. It's the same thing when it comes to vocalizing the ancient Arabic text. As I showed in my diagrams, the writing is ambiguous. It doesn't have the dots and dashes, so it's just ambiguous. And the fact that it sort of developed into all these different readings actually shows a disruption of knowledge, that it's not that there's one Quran being perfectly passed down, and so you could have an ambiguous text because it doesn't really matter, because there's this accompanying knowledge that goes with the text. What we actually find is that we've got this text which is ambiguous, and an explosion of readings coming from it because people have got to work out how to do it. So you see what I mean by that? There's this disruption of knowledge.
Yeah.
I only heard about this last night, and it just brings together so well what we observe. Anyway, it's this disruption of knowledge, and things are not coming straight from Muhammad. There's some period where people don't know anything, and then they're picking it back up and trying to make sense of it.
Yeah, and they trying to. The more that we Christians or non-Muslims discover things, they trying to discover a way to go around it. But a lot of time, Muhammad put them in a position where they cannot go around it.
Yes.
Because if you go to the Hadith, you're gonna find exactly what explaining what he's trying to say. Then their new explanation for that problem is not gonna make sense because Muhammad already put them in a box.
Yes.
Like the idea of Mary, the sister of Moses and Aaron, they try and say, "Oh, she's just a descendant." Of that, but there's no way around it. Reading the story in full, there's no way that they can come with that idea, just from descendant of Moses and Aaron. Do you have any comment about that story?
Yes, well, we can tell that it's a problem because if you look in Sahih Muslim, there's a hadith trying to address the problem. So it's obviously a problem because, whenever you've got some problem in the Quran, you will find a hadith trying to give an answer to it.
Yeah.
Okay. And so it's told in terms of the Christians of Najran coming to Muhammad and saying, you say Mary, who is Moses' sister, Moses and Aaron's sister, but she's a long time after. And then Muhammad tries to give an answer. And so he says, people just had the same family names. And so it's it's talking about a man named Amram who had a son, daughter, and another son, Moses, Miriam, and Aaron, but he's just 1,500 years later. And,
but the whole chapter of Imran is supposed to be talking about Jesus, right?
Yeah.
It is centered on it has a lot of references about Jesus and Mary, and now they want to say, okay, that's for another Imran. It happened to be the same last name. If you can read this question here.
Okay, Reverend Green, do you believe Dr. J's stance that Mecca and therefore Muhammad didn't exist as per the standard narrative and that the Quran was developed up north? If not, why? I would say that I don't reject it, but I don't fully accept it either. I'm still waiting to get more evidence. I can certainly see many aspects of what he's saying. I'm just not convinced that we can completely write off Mecca yet. And I do feel that if it was developed all up north, then we wouldn't have what I just said before, and that is that break of knowledge, because it just would have been developed and it just, we would just have one Quran in one reading, right? What it seems to me is that the fact that we've got some ancient document that people are getting and then later on having to try to read it, it shows that there was something earlier which is, which hasn't been fully remembered, and they're trying to do it now. So, with Jay, I mean, I think he's doing an excellent job, and I'm looking forward to his book coming out so I can just see more of that evidence for myself, because I'm just not prepared to write off Mecca as being non-existent just yet. And related to this is, if I was inventing something much later, why would I have Muhammad coveting another man's wife and then Allah saying, you can have her, I've abolished all adoption so that you can take your wife. I just can't see anyone inventing that. To me, that is actually a real person who is using God's name for his own lusts. So to me, that is the work of a real prophet. There is some real prophet who is using the name of God for his own lust. And so I think that there is some Muhammad figure in there. But I'm still waiting for all the, I'm waiting for their book to come out to consider the evidence.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. There is so much that they've been bringing on. Last year we were in the UK. They have all the scholars about the Gnostic Gospels and link it to the Quran, and also the issue of the coins. There's no coin that goes to the time of Muhammad that has the Shahada in it. And definitely there's a lot there, but I agree that we cannot put all our arguments based on that. We still need to fight the Hadith and the Muhammad of the Hadith and the Quran. And we cannot just put all our eggs in one basket.
Yeah. I mean, even if you look at St. John of Damascus, and I think that he really backs up what Jay is saying here. And this is what I mean by, I'm not rejecting what Jay says. It's only, I'm still wanting to hold on to some of the earlier stuff as well. Because if you read St. John of Damascus in, Against Heresies, where he talks about the heresy of the Ishmaelites, he talks about, he quotes the Quran very accurately, and he has the name of the different surahs, and he's very accurate in what he does. But then he talks about a surah called the Camel, and he retells a story which we just don't have in the Quran today. And so that's showing, I think, exactly what Jay is showing, that the Quran is still in pieces and it hasn't been formed together. Yeah. Right? It's not in this one solid canon at this stage. And so that's the early 8th century, which is along what Jay is saying. So, I'm not rejecting what he's saying, but I'm still just getting all the evidence, and I think there is other evidence that I find that I want to consider as well. Yeah.
Saying second question. If you can look at this question.
I haven't read that book. So I think that Jay's spoken about that. Is this with the Mahmud? So there being a whole lot of different Mahmuds around. And yes, I'm taking that on board. I think that that's what that question was saying. And it raises the point that, Mecca is meant to be this big trading center, and the Quraysh are meant to be international traders, but nobody ever mentions them in all their trade. And you're going, well, they don't seem to be, they don't seem to be international traders. There's just no evidence of that. And so.
Okay, here. What has been the reaction of Muslims when you have shown them the differences in the different Qurans?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. So my favorite one is a man named Mustafa, where I held up 2 different Qurans at a debate. And as soon as he saw that, he said, my leaders have been lying to me. My leaders have been lying to me. And he became a Christian.
Oh, praise God.
Right? And God. So for me, that's the best case scenario, because he knew about Jesus being God and was taught to reject it. He knew about Jesus not dying on the cross and, was taught to reject the cross. And he was taught to reject all these things because the Bible's been changed and there's one perfect Quran. So his whole reason for rejecting the gospel was the Bible's changed, there's one perfect Quran. As soon as I showed him the evidence for the Bible being preserved and there's different Qurans, all of a sudden he had no ground anymore. And he just came to me. He actually helped me do some work. And he just said, that was it. My leaders have been lying to me. And I guess that's why today I've just taken Islam on its own terms. So a number of those questions that have come up, which have been good questions, are looking at Islam more critically, and there's a place for that. What I'm trying to do is just to look at what the Quran itself says. So to really look at the Islamic dilemma, which we've been discussing, right? So I'm not trying to look at, trying to pull that dilemma apart or anything, but actually say, no, let's just look at it. The Quran says it confirms the Bible. I don't care when the Quran was put together or by who, right? I'm not asking that critical question. It says it confirms the Bible. It doesn't. It says Muhammad's foretold in the Bible. He's not. And because of that failure, that's why they say the Bible's been changed. They're trying to explain that failure of the Quran, right? They've got to explain that failure, and they do that by blaming us.
Yeah.
And the other reactions would be, so the best case scenario would be they've become a Christian, then others would be shocked. Others would just be shocked, and they'd go away and think about it. Others would say, oh, yeah, we know all about those. We know all about them. And, Muhammad recited all, hundreds of thousands of variants. Muhammad allowed all these variants, all the variants from the many different readings. And then, 10 were selected, and however many however you're going to measure it. And so they'll say, no, we know all about it. That's all part of the story. And you go, well, hang on, why didn't you say that? Why do you go around saying there's one Quran? Don't go around saying there's one Quran if there's these 10. So
perfectly to the letter. Even if you burn all Qurans, it's memorized in the heart of the Muslims. Anyone can recite it for you from all across the world.
Yeah.
They don't tell us in Somalia they memorize Amru Quran. In Yemen they memorize this Quran and that Quran. We set up tables with the different Qurans at Arabic festivals, and Muslims comes and open it, and we have a sign done by one of our friends, beautiful sign. Maybe she's with us online now. How many different Arabic Qurans are there? Just a question, and from far away they will be shouting one Quran, and when they come, they start taking their phones and taking pictures of the different Qurans. It's when we have over 10 Qurans, it's so hard to argue all of them, but have two open. Like, for example, this is Warsh Quran.
Yes.
We marked all the variances in the Warsh and Hafs between the two. And you can do it color coding, like the ones that it make big different, clear different that they cannot argue, make it on red and make different arguments and different color code. But focus on two. Have even one verse open, only one verse. Would you read this? Would you read this? And what I start doing, I start setting a table with Bibles. I have the Gospel of Matthew, Mark, John, and Luke separately. Like sometimes I use an image like that.
Yes.
Because when they say we have many Bibles, sometimes they meant the 4 Gospels. I have a New Testament and Old Testament separately. Sometimes they meant all the New Testament. They have they have a lot of different translations. They have different languages, just like the Quran. They have different languages. They have the different versions of the Bible in English language, and I also have different versions of the Quran, Yusuf Ali and other translations. And I will answer their objections about what they mean by many Bibles. Very, very small amount of people they go to the manuscripts of the Bible or Greek or stuff like that. Sometimes, where's the Greek Bible? We want the sorry, not the Greek, the Aramaic Bible. They insisting they want the Aramaic Bible because that's what Jesus spoke. But I love what my friend Lewis will use. I will ask them, would you please open this verse in the Quran? And here they find Jesus is speaking in the Quran. And I ask them, who's speaking? They say, Jesus. What language? They say, Arabic. Oh, no.
Yeah.
I will not accept that. I want the Aramaic language. But by having this table, one side, the Bible, one side, the Quran, and show them, because after they take pictures of these different Qurans, they want to walk away, and I ask them what else they lied to you about. They say, what do you mean? I say, what they tell you about the Bible being corrupted. Then I will show them the differences, what they meant by 4 Bibles or all the new, and I explain these things to them. But the most powerful part is I use now with them all the time is uh, your track, the one page about what is the Bible. And
Yes.
it changed their perspective completely. You can download that in your website, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it is very powerful one page showing this is a book that revealed in not one book, 66 holy books revealed in 1500 years to more than 40 different prophets in 3 different countries and 3 different languages. When he tell them that, it just changed their perspective completely.
Yes.
It's like, wow, one guy, he refused to give me my Bible back. He took it with him. It's just very, very powerful when you show that, because now it's not longer one book against one book. It's all God's revelation against one book.
Yes.
It has 2 periods, Mecca and Medina, contradictions, the abrogation, theology, and all that filled with mistakes. And now here we're showing 66 holy books, all pointing to Jesus. It's very, very powerful, that one gospel track.
Yes. Yep. All right. Well, I need to get going.
No problem. Thank you so much, brother. Thank you. And looking forward to see you next month. And guys, you guys watching online, please keep us in prayer as we travel the next few weeks to Europe and then to Minnesota to reach out to the Somali community. I know a couple of years ago you were with us there, Samuel.
Yes.
But thank you so much, Samuel, for being with us today. And God bless you, brother. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on your channel, George. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye bye. And please, if you can in any way that you support our trip, please feel free to use the link in the channel I posted earlier. We need your help. We have a lot of expenses to take care of. But also, if you can join us in Minnesota, we would love to see you guys the last week of June. But the last week of July, we will be in Detroit area, and would love to have you with us. If you are able to come, please feel free to call us at you go to our website, ministrytomuslims.com, and you can feel free to call us from there. And for until next week, please get the word out, share the videos with more people. We need to encourage more people to be equipped. I don't want you, please, in any way to be just person that attending and coming every week. We want you to see you reaching out to the Muslims that God brought, but God put next to you in your at your work or next door, lives next to you, Muslims in your city. I encourage you to share the gospel with them. We need to realize that they are blinded. The God of this world blinded their eyes; they cannot see. We need to see them in heaven one day, and the only way is to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ to these people. Don't underestimate the power of the gospel. Amen. God bless you guys, and see you next week at 4 o'clock Pacific time or 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And God bless you guys. Bye bye.